like to welcome everybody to Principles of Servant Leadership. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm very excited to have you here. So this is a webinar that we have done before. I like to say it's backed by popular demand. We had an outstanding turnout when we first offered this webinar a few months ago, and we had such fantastic feedback that we have decided to go ahead and offer it one more time. So again, as you're just joining us, please feel free to use your chat feature, share your name, location, weather, and then we're going to go ahead and dive in. So I believe that everybody, I think, is on mute. I think I have that ability to mute everybody. Main reason why is simply to reduce the background sounds. I know sometimes things pop up, sometimes phone calls, certainly emails. So I just encourage you, since this is about an hour worth of your time for your personal development, to try to ignore any phone calls or emails, text messages that may come in, just so that you can get the very most out of this webinar as possible. So I also muted you all just because, in case there is background noise, sometimes dogs bark and so on and so forth, it wouldn't interrupt us. And then also, if you'd like, I'd love to see your smiling face, so please make sure you turn on your camera. And we are looking for participation via chat as well as some polls today. So you will definitely have some interactivity. So I'd like to go ahead and take a moment to introduce myself to all of you. My name is Michelle Padilla. I am a Director and Senior Leadership Consultant here with FCC Services. I have been with FCC now for just almost 6 months, which is exciting. It's been a fantastic experience and great organization. Farm credit is something that's very special. I have family that have been in the farming background in the state of Wyoming for actually many generations. Although I personally did not grow up in the farm credit system, I am certainly familiar with it and have family, as I mentioned. So just a little bit about my background. I've been in learning and design for the last 20 years, which is a little painful to say out loud, but I started when I was 12. Just kidding. So it's been an exciting experience, and it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, where I love to take the opportunity and really be able to help people with their growth, whether it's in leadership, soft skills, and various other areas that I've worked with in my career. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jeannie Klinkenbeard, who is also a Director and Senior Leadership Consultant, and I will let her share a little bit about her role today as well as her background.
Hi everyone, greetings from Denver, and I will be checking the chat. I'm more of the host in the background today, so please feel free to enter your comments and questions in chat, and I will be checking those frequently and letting Michelle know if there's kind of need to interrupt the content and just talk about what some of the comments or questions that you have. So great to have you all today, and without further ado, I'm going to send it back to Michelle.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive into the learning objectives. So servant leadership, learning about the 10 principles. Why are you here? So we're going to talk about what servant leadership is and really illustrate the difference of servant leadership from the autocratic leadership style, which you may be familiar with. And then also we're going to talk about, when we learn those 10 principles of servant leadership, some simple ways that you can actually start to implement them into your organization or practice them even on your own if you may not be in a decision-making capacity at your organization. So we're going to start out by just kind of talking about some organizations that use servant leadership. And this content comes from Forbes 2019 Best Places to Work. So you're going to see some familiar brands on this list. Some might be a little challenging or controversial in the current state, but one of what I think is interesting about these particular organizations, so Starbucks, Marriott, Wegmans, REI Co-op, is that they're all very much customer focused because they serve the customers. They are a business to consumer organization. And for those of you that may or may not be familiar with Wegmans, they are a grocery store chain, a little bit smaller, not like a Kroger brand, such as King Soopers, for example, if you're familiar with either of those. But Wegmans is a little bit smaller, and I think primarily found in the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken. So when I ran across Wegmans, I had to stop and learn a little bit about that organization myself. So I'm sure that many of you do recognize these organizations. Many of you may have stayed at Marriott's and hopefully have had good experiences. But it's not only the fact that servant leadership, is about the customer. This really is something that trickles throughout the organization with its employees. So from senior leadership on down, and which is one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight these particular organizations. So let's take a look at chat. So again, I encourage you to open the chat button, and I would love to see what you share. So right now, my question to you is, why do you think that servant leadership can lead to good business results? So take a moment to think about that and type it in chat. I see Jason was the first. Yes, it empowers employees. You've got engaged employees. The impact to the customers, exactly. And you're right, puts the other people first. It's not about the ego. Excuse me, ego. It sounded like I said eagle. So it's not about the ego. The employees definitely feel more valued. They definitely build loyalty. Places where that are great to work, like the 4 that I showed you, generally have lower turnover because employees like to be there because they recognize that their thoughts and ideas are recognized and welcomed by senior leadership, that it's not about senior leadership pounding their fists on the table and saying, this is how we're going to do it. It's my way or the highway. You'll hear me say that again relatively soon. I also see a couple of people that are saying, building team atmosphere, it drives collaboration, leading with employees rather than pushing down from the top. Absolutely true. And employees feel heard, and that's important. That's absolutely true, all of those. So really great points. Very well written. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about the person that really brought servant leadership to the forefront of businesses, and this is Robert K. Greenleaf. So he was really, I think, a pretty interesting person. He wrote that what many people consider to be a landmark essay on servant leadership in 1970. And from that essay, the term servant leader became known and really catapulted the idea of servant leadership to the forefront and into the mainstream. So Mr. Greenleaf actually worked for AT&T for about 38 years. He was responsible for the development and the management within AT&T. He was one of the first people within that organization to actually promote women and African-American employees to non-menial roles, which is pretty outstanding, especially in this day and age. He also helped to create the first assessment centers and brought external speakers into AT&T. So you can see by some of the accomplishments that he's had, how that has changed the face of business as we know it, starting from several decades prior to now. So he knows that servant leaders are those with that strong desire to serve first and foremost. We're looking for leaders that are going to influence rather than control. And as you guys all put in the chat, they listen to the needs, there's growth and development of people first. It's, you hear people over profits. This is a good example of that. And also listening. We know that there's a difference between active listening and then just listening, or active listening and hearing, but actively listening to people's opinions and thinking about them and then putting something into action. And what I think is most important to understand is the servant leader, that person, he or she really comes last. So we're going to talk a little bit about autocratic leadership and servant leadership, and there's a clear difference. So we're going to start with autocratic leadership. So what you see here is the autocratic leader is a person that puts him or herself first, and results matter. Numbers matter to this individual. So generally, these leaders are not collaborative, and they focus on results and expect to get them at any cost. So there's very little coaching from an autocratic leader. And this is the type of boss who is usually the one that has the loudest voice in the room or pounds his or her fist on the desk, or maybe even they pound their chest, but they have to be heard no matter what. So with autocratic leadership, you're going to see the leader is first, the results are second, and then that leader is going to be 100% responsible for those results because he or she got those results. It wasn't a team effort. I did it. And then the team is going to come in last place. So if any of you have worked under autocratic leadership, it's a big challenge. It's very difficult and it's not really fun. It's not fun to be in an environment where you're constantly shut down and you don't get that opportunity for growth and for coaching. However, if you are working for a servant leader, the servant leader is going to put that team first, the results are going to be second, and then the leader comes last. That leader is saying, my amazing team, my business analysts, they're the ones that got the results. This is why we have had this success. So you can see the leadership is vastly different. Achieving results is important to both leaders, but the main difference is how each leader achieves those results. So keeping what I just shared with you in mind, please go ahead and open up your chat again. And I'd like to ask you the following question. Why do results come after team in the servant leadership triangle? Matt has a great answer. When you care about the team is more focused on the results. The team creates the results. The results will come if your team is aligned and feels supported. Thank you, Jenny. Empowering the team. The team feels backed and supported and they will provide better results. Thank you. That is B2AEG. So thank you for that. People first. The team, and this is B2DAB, the team, people, are in the spotlight and then they produce. That's absolutely right. You know, one of the things that's great about this question is the results come because the team knows what's in it for them. They understand. It's not just necessarily dangling a carrot and saying, hey, if you reach a goal of $250,000 in sales, you get to go to the Bahamas for a sales meeting, you know, a big party and celebration. It's not only about that, but it's actually thinking about someone who has a specific role and a specific accomplishment that gets you the result that you want. So maybe that's promotion, maybe it's coaching, maybe it's a lateral move, maybe it's a small, a bonus. You know, there's a lot of different motivators, but in most cases, that result really stems from knowing what the purpose is and the role in which you play on that team that will impact the business. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to launch what I believe is my first poll. So bear with me here for just a second. Okay, so here's your question. Have you ever left a job because of your relationship with your manager? So we have about 70% that's voted so far, a little bit higher now. So I'll leave the poll open for just about 15 more seconds. So the question is, have you ever left a job because of your relationship with your manager? So thinking specifically, what's the relationship? Not whether or not you had the appropriate skills, but what was your relationship like? Okay, I am going to end the polling here. Okay, and let me share the results with you. So, yes, most people have left a job because of the relationship with their manager, about 53% of you. But what I do find interesting is that there is still, it's not a huge gap, but 47% of you said, no, I have not left because of my relationship. So kudos to you, because maybe you have been lucky enough to work under somebody or for an organization that uses servant leadership, or at least part of the principles, maybe not all 10, but good for you. And for those of you that have left a job due to that relationship, I mean, it's challenging, but I think at the end of the day, you probably made the right decision in doing that, and hopefully you found something better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go on, and we're going to transition into the 10 principles of servant leadership. Now, I'll warn you here, so please bear with me. We are going to show you just a short little video that's going to introduce you to the 10 principles. And you should be able to hear this, so I'm going to go ahead and launch it now.
Servant leaders demonstrate. Film talks about servant leadership, what it is and why it makes sense. Servant leadership is a tried and tested leadership approach that's about creating a shift from managing for results to designing environments that create results. Robert Greenleaf coined the phrase servant leadership in the 1970s. It's a form of leadership that replaces self-interest with service to others. Servant leadership is about influence rather than power and control, focusing on others' strengths rather than weaknesses, listening rather than giving orders, and long-range benefits rather than short-term profits. Servant leaders demonstrate a range of 9 key attributes. The good news is that all of these can be developed. Listening, self-awareness, foresight, empathy, persuasion, stewardship, healing, conceptualization, and building a sense of community. Servant leadership is about transformation and future focus. And adopting its leadership principles complements agile ways of working really well. The nature of work in the workplace has changed.
Okay, so that just gave you an introduction to servant
drastically.
Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about the first 3 principles. So since there's 10 principles of servant leadership, we're going to go through 3 and then have a little chat time, and then we'll go through the rest of them with a little bit more chat time. So I promise I won't talk at you the whole rest of this time. So we're going to start with listening. So you heard me talk about the difference between active listening and just hearing. So listening effectively and remembering there's that difference. So when you listen to your employees, you want to think and act on what they are saying. So listening drives how the employees feel. They feel valued, and they feel like that you are trusting them as a leader. So that is one thing that's very important. And whether you are a top-level leader within your organization, whether you are a new manager or somewhere mid-manager level, listening is really important, and actually like thinking about how you're going to listen. So leaning in, listening, matching and mirroring the person or the people in front of you to show that you are intently listening. And also taking notes is always good too, and summarizing and paraphrasing what you've heard will prove to those that are in your presence that you're actually listening to what they say. So empathy. Let's say your employee has a sick child at home, or maybe it's a sick spouse. But the servant leader may not always be able to relate to that situation. Maybe they're single, maybe they don't have any kids, but that's okay. Just try to relate and definitely empathize as a leader. And, you know, I'm certainly lucky enough where my leader and Jeannie's leader as well, our new vice president, Lisa, she's been fantastic. And she certainly is one of the most empathetic people that I've ever worked for, which has been truly outstanding. And with those of us, since we are all in this together with COVID-19, this is something that I'm hoping that your leaders have certainly shown you, is some empathy with the situation that we have all been dealing with, whether you have sick kids or a sick spouse or family members that have fallen ill, or any number of other things that can happen. Empathy is really going to be key. Having that too bad, so sad attitude does nothing but cause dissent between the manager and the employee. And that is an example, again, of an autocratic leader versus a servant leader. So let's take a look at the third principle, which is healing. So let's assume that a team experiences a trauma. And by trauma, that can be a sudden loss, such as a change in teammates. Maybe there's a layoff or someone that is really well liked or respected quits. Or it could be an unfortunate death of a loved one, or something that just leaves kind of a hole in your organization or a hole in your team. So how do you go about healing that wound or that hole that was left by an event that caused that trauma? So a servant leader is going to find a way of how to do that. You know, it can be boosting morale, for example. There's many ways in which you can heal, doing more team building, but certainly recognizing the trauma itself is a way to help heal the team, rather than just, again, too bad, so sad. The person that left the team, for example, is just a number. We'll get another one. That's not an empathetic leader. That's not a leader that heals. So that's definitely more of an autocratic leader versus a servant leader. So let's take another look into your chat modules, and let's see this question. Where have you seen one of these three principles in action? So when you think about the listening, empathy, and healing, where have you seen those principles in action? Did you see it from a coworker? Did you see it from your boss? Or do you engage in these principles? I see Larry. Thank you, Larry, from the CEO and the team leader. Absolutely true. And Jane says, her supervisor. And Travis, I love hearing this. Quite honestly, Farm Credit is full of folks who practice these principles from the top down. I see more CEOs, HR, supervisors, a coworker. And so, and Kim, you're saying, I wish I engaged these principles more frequently. Absolutely. Well, you can, and you'll be able to with this webinar to help you introduce you to those principles and then put them into practice. Kim also says we get too busy and forget. Sometimes that happens. First line supervisor, according to Nick, senior leaders, other members of your team. Great. So there's a lot of places that you can see the servant leadership really coming through. You don't have to be a top level leader. You don't have to be a manager. It's just something that, you know, you can find within your organization. And Luke writes, mentors in and out of the workplace. Great. And Mari, she says, as a supervisor, I try to be an active listener. Excellent. Excellent. Keep it up. All right, we're going to move on to the next three, which principle 4 is awareness, principle 5 is persuasion, and principle 6 is conceptualization. So awareness, this is probably one of my favorite principles within servant leadership. And this is really talking about your self-awareness, but awareness of others within your organization or within your team. So if a leader is not the most perceptive person, and sometimes that's the case, you can use different tools. And one of the tools that I think work really well is a DISC profile or a predictive index. And there's various other tools that you can use that would help to understand the type of people that you work with in your teams or organization, or who your boss is, or if you are a leader, how does your team work? And understanding those parts of a person's personality is really key to make you more aware of the team and how it functions, but then also making sure that you have that self-awareness. And thinking back to what Mari said in her chat, saying that she tries to be an active listener. So there's a great example of self-awareness, saying, I think I do this, I'm trying really hard to do it. And that is excellent. So I'm glad to hear that she's doing that. But anything, again, that helps keep you more aware of your team and yourself, that is going to be really important to that principle. And then as we look at persuasion and cooperation are key elements of a servant leader. If we think about an autocratic leader, remember that this is the loudest voice of the room. This is the person that bangs his or her fist on the table. This leader will lead with delegation authority. They will be coerced into abiding by standards and ideas that may not be welcome, because you might hear the term, this is how we've always done it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Though that type of attitude and those old adages are really very autocratic, and they're the antithesis of what a servant leader should be doing. So coercion does not make a trusting team, but someone that is using persuasion and influence, cooperation, collaboration appropriately can help move the organization forward and move the team forward to those goals. Nurturing different ideas and different perspectives, and really stopping to think, how can we put this together for team-driven results? And then conceptualization. The servant leader has the ability to really not be bogged down in, say, analysis paralysis. And sometimes that's really easy to happen. Some people that are highly analytical, they really get into that analysis paralysis, and it's like quicksand. You got to pull them out, right? Because analysis paralysis doesn't move your team forward if you are in that paralysis part of your analysis. But with conceptualization, the servant leader can really balance the long-term impacts as well as what's going on today. So they need to look at that big picture, but then also look at today's issues and solve those problems. Keeping in mind that it's not to say that the devil isn't always in the details, but the leader should be able to really conceptualize that goal and then work towards it without being too far-sighted or too nearsighted. And depending, again, think about, I'm going to go back for a moment to like a DISC assessment or predictive index or various other tools. This tool, again, ties back to awareness so that you can be aware of how someone thinks. If they're very much into the analysis, that is good awareness. And for someone that has taken DISC and they look at their profile, for example, they know that their analysis, they're strong in analysis. They want to be careful and know, hey, I should pull back and not get too deep into this. And let's think about the big picture as well as what I'm facing today. So go ahead and pull up your chat boxes again. And I'm going to ask, where have you seen one of these three principles in action again? Because when you think about these three actions, when you're talking about conceptualization, persuasion, that kind of awareness, sometimes that might come from coworkers, but other times those might also be something that you see from leaders. And I think Kim brings up a good question. Loudest in the room doesn't always mean the loudest. Can it be the person that does all the talking in the boardroom? Absolutely. And I think that's a good way to interpret it, because loudest means, yes, it can be the person that wants to have it his way or the highway, but then it's also someone that maybe just talks so much and doesn't listen and doesn't allow others' ideas to come into that organization. So that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, Kim. And I see Jason, he writes, we make a discussion of DISC assessments between new employees and mentors as part of our onboarding process. Absolutely, that's great. That is absolutely helpful. And I noticed that Larry also mentioned StrengthsFinder, which I'm a big fan of, and that is also an excellent tool to really look at your strengths and to make you aware of what you do well. So I like that as well. So Larry writes, drawing a picture of what the future can look like. So you've seen those principles in action. So I like that. That's a great one. And again, Mari writes, many are longtime employees and it may be hard to move them from the way that we've always done it to how you're making changes. And it is baby steps. Try it and see approach. Absolutely. That's part of change management. And Travis says he's seen these principles at planning meetings with board, work groups, with peers, etc. Absolutely. So there's a lot of places that you can see this, see these principles in action. What I think is interesting is, you know, for you guys to think about this is, do you see all 10 of these in action? And I know you don't know the rest of the principles right at the moment, so that's something for you to think about down in a few minutes, but do you honestly see all 10 of these in action? Do you see 5 of them? Do you see 3 or 4 of them? So some food for thought for you. And I see that B2GOC says internal training departments and or trainers, near to dear to my heart. So I'm very happy to see that and read that. That's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the final 4. So we're talking about foresight, stewardship, building community, and commitment to growth of people. So foresight is very similar to conceptualization because you are looking again at looking forward, looking at the big picture, looking at your long-term goals. It's also the idea of taking lessons learned from your past and then what was the impact and how is the present affected, and then how would the future be affected as well. So this, you know, think about cause and effect of the decisions that you make, whether it's within your team, whether you're a senior, whether or not you are a senior leader within your organization. Anything that you do today, right now, will affect tomorrow. It will affect the day after tomorrow. It will always have some type of consequence. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about foresight. And as leaders, you know, especially like, for example, I know someone mentioned in the chat, planning meetings. That's a great example. What are my lessons learned? What have I done in the past? What am I doing now? And how will that affect me in the future as I facilitate these planning sessions? So stewardship, one of my other favorite principles of servant leadership, is thinking about how the organization can be better. How can the organization better a community or even give back to a community? So this is the ultimate good citizen. And what might this look like? So this could be something more than just giving money to charities, as I know many organizations do, and I applaud you. I think that's great. But this is also maybe a community service day is given to employees who get to participate in something positive and something good for the organization, and it impacts the community both financially and spiritually. So that's part of stewardship. And not all organizations have these community service days. Some do, some don't. Some might do employee gift matching, which is great as well. But thinking about stewardship, and if you're in a position to use stewardship to your advantage within your organization, I encourage you to do that. And if it's not something that comes from the top down within your association, perhaps it is something as simple as what can your team do? What can your team do as a whole to make something better for the community? And sometimes it starts with a baby step and it's a team that's doing something, and then it grows into something greater and greater. And then poof, one day, maybe you have a community service day at your organization, and it all starts with one team, for example. So love stewardship. Let's take a look at Principle 9, building community. So building community is really talking about developing communities within your organization. So how do you blend, for example, generations? We have certainly Gen X, baby boomers, millennials, also known as Gen Y, and now really who's entering the workforce is Generation Z. They're coming of age, and think about with your generations and your team members, how can you be creative with your team? Because each generation, for example, each community within your organization, they bring vast differences in your skills, in their persuasion, the foresight. So this means a lot fewer silos, if any at all. So the organization really becomes a community of one. And then the last principle is your commitment to growth of people. So servant leaders really have to have this true commitment to the development of their people, much like what I mentioned earlier when I talked about Mr. Greenleaf and how he helped promote women and African Americans to non-menial jobs. I mean, that is truly a growth of your people, which has then opened doors more and more for other, continuing to open doors for both women, African Americans, and then any other minority that is in the workforce as well. So each employee at every level should really choose this type of leadership for the employee's strength. For their strengths, for their belief and their trust in the organization will grow organically. So it's something to definitely think about. You've got, organizations have a deep pool of talent, so work on promoting that within. And sometimes when you go outside and you can bring some great talent in there as well. And if you've got that, build on it. Start from within. And one of those end results, the more that you commit to grow your people, can make you more of a competitive organization. All right, so I'm going to launch another poll here. Let me find my second poll. Give me just one moment here. Okay. So I want you to think of one servant leadership principle that you practice today and choose it. So I've got all 10 listed. Of all 10, which one do you practice today? So just a little bit of a reminder, if you have not yet voted in this poll, please do so. I'd love to get a wide variety of answers. I'd love to see where this is coming in right now, and I like what I'm seeing. Okay, and I'm going to end the poll in about 5 seconds. All right, so now I'm going to show you the results. So the number one principle that it looks like all of you practiced today is listening, which is fantastic. That was the first one on our list. So I love that you guys are practicing that. Excellent. The empathy is excellent as well. Love the empathy. And then it really decreases from there. But I see stewardship, I see some conceptualization, foresight, commitment to growth, very little healing. I think that's a hard one. And, Again, it could be something that impacts your team as a whole. It could be something that impacts an individual. So just thinking about how can you help? And there's lots of different ideas around healing. Maybe it is, something that if a team member becomes ill, maybe you all rally around that individual and bring them food, send them flowers. Certain things are allowed during COVID, some things are not. So we want to keep that in mind regardless of your environment. But great answers. Thank you, everyone. And then I'm going to go to another poll here in just a moment, I think. Hold on, my PowerPoint disappeared on me for just a minute, so let me make sure you can see that. Okay, there we go. So I have a similar question. This time you can ask or answer more than one. So which servant leadership principle will you practice tomorrow? Thinking about foresight, what choices you make today are going to impact tomorrow? So what are you going to do? What are you going to start practicing? So I'd love to have a few more people voting. Let me see what your answers are. It's really fun because when you are the facilitator and you get to see the poll, you get to see everything, increasing and decreasing on the line graph. It's pretty cool. And I really like what I'm seeing here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in about 3 seconds. Okay, so we have an increase in listening. So that's one of the things that you all are committing to do more tomorrow. You're going to listen more. And I love the awareness. Thank you. So you're going to focus on being more aware of yourself, but then also aware of others, so your team. And then I see the foresight. That was a big jump. Stewardship, building community as well, committing to the growth of your people. Healing, great. I like what I see. Thanks for sharing, everyone. I appreciate that. So I just wanted to share with you just a few more things here. The magazine Inc. or INC, it's similar to Forbes. It published a list of the world's top 10 CEOs who lead it differently. So the companies and names on this list are definitely unique, and they're not your normal household name CEOs, for example, from Apple, Microsoft, but these are CEOs who embrace servant leadership. And so these are some quotes that I pulled, and if you might recognize the name Cheryl Batchelor, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she says, I must know you to grow you. Love it. She wants to get to know you, be aware of you. She has that commitment to growth. And she is actually the CEO, or I think she's the former CEO of Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. And then we have Ari Weinzewig, who says, beliefs underlie every single thing we do, both individually and organizationally. Beliefs are like the root system of our lives. I love that. I think that's a very poignant quote. And Ari is the founder of Zingerman's Community of Businesses, and it started out as a deli in, I believe, the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken, and has grown to a conglomerate with 10 different businesses. And then we have Gary Ridge, who is a CEO of WD-40. So you recognize that brand because we all probably have it in our tool sheds or garages and spray it on some squeaky things and make our household function a little bit better. And Gary Ridge says, leadership is about learning and teaching. We have no mistakes here. We have learning moments. And again, coming from that learning and development background, I was like, thank you, Gary Ridge. Thank you. Because that's what it is. Leadership is about learning and teaching. No leader is perfect. They're going to make mistakes, and they have learning moments just like we do in everyday life. And then the last one that I'll share with you is Brittany Merrill Underwood. She is the CEO of Untitled Jewelry, which is a luxury brand that's sold through Neiman Marcus. But what she says here is she actually practices conscious capitalism to transform the lives of impoverished women and families. So we know that leadership, that principle is about community, which I love. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily say they practice all 10, but they certainly practice several of these different principles. And I think this is really outstanding. So definitely some things to think about. And as you grow in leaders in your own leadership at your organization, or if you are a senior leader now. So I named some of the principles that I think that these CEOs embody. What are some other principles that you think that they would embody based on what you know about them? So go ahead and open up your chat button and let's see what else you think they embody. And as you're thinking about this, I'll just give you a little reminder because you don't know all of these CEOs and who they're with. The CEO, Cheryl, she is from Popeyes. Ari is from Zingerman's, and he started out as a deli and grew to a conglomerate with 10 different businesses. Gary Ridge was WD-40, and Brittany Merrill is Cola Jewelry. Yep, and I like what I'm seeing, commitment to the growth of people, many, if not all, 10 principles of servant leadership, awareness, empathy, allows team members to make mistakes and learn from them. Yes, absolutely. I love, Catherine, you wrote Foresight, absolutely true. And I think Foresight, you know, just based on the information we have right now, I think Foresight is a really good one to think about Ari Winzawag, because he has growth. You know, now he's a CEO of a conglomerate. So thinking about the things that he did when he had his deli and how that would impact his future. And Kelly writes, listening, stewardship, foresight, building community, commitment to growth of people. Absolutely. Great answers. Good job. So as we're getting close to time, I just want to leave you with a kind of learning recap and know that we talked about defining servant leadership and illustrate the difference. And I apologize, I realize I have altruistic and I meant autocratic leadership styles, but we were specifically talking about autocratic leadership versus servant leadership. So we defined those differences, understand what they are, and then we talked about how to develop and implement those 10 principles of servant leadership as well. So before we leave, I just want to give everybody, okay, Kevin, I like your sense of humor. Kevin writes, Gary takes the squeak out of mistakes. Very good. Love that WD-40 idea. But I'd love to open up the chat and find out. We have just a few minutes before the time is done. Does anyone have any questions about servant leadership? Or even if you don't have a question, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share? So please take a moment and chat if you'd like to add anything. Oh, you're welcome, Ken. Thank you. Kristen, you're welcome. So I'm going to leave the chat open and see. Oh, nope, Mari asked a question. Is DISC assessment? Yes, DISC assessment is available from FCC Services, and thank you for asking that. Jeannie is our DISC guru, so we can make sure that we connect with you to answer some questions about DISC for sure. Perfect. So I'm going to leave the chat box open, and if you guys have any thoughts, please go ahead and type them in, and then I'm going to let Jeannie read this quote from Oprah.
All right, so our final words as we bid you all goodbye. Leadership is about empathy. It is about having the ability to relate to and connect with people for the purpose of inspiring and empowering their lives. That's what good leadership does. Inspire and empower. Thank you all.
Absolutely true. Thank you, Jeannie. And then the last thing I'll leave you with before you head out for the rest of your day to implement servant leadership principles is just to let you know that we are offering an online strategic communication program. It's called Go From A Leader to The Leader with Ryan Avery. And Ryan Avery has spoken at some of our past learning conferences and other conferences that we offer as well, so you may have heard of him. So you can find the link to register if you're interested. It's a 16-week program that starts July 9th. So you can find the link on our website as well as other social media platforms. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all joining us and listening and learning about servant leadership. If at any time you have questions, please feel free to reach out to myself as well as Jeannie, and we look forward to hearing from you again. So thanks everyone. I hope you guys have a great day and a great rest of your week. Take care.